She pointed one finger at my mother and told her to get off the property like she was chasing a stray dog out of a garden. My mother, 69 years old, in the lavender dress she'd pressed 3 times that morning, just stopped on the walkway and went still. I was still standing by the car with the keys in my hand, and the woman screaming at her? She was my husband's mother. A woman who had never once paid a single cent toward the house she was now claiming as her own. I need to tell you this story because I've spent 8 months trying to make sense of it, and I still feel my pulse climb when I picture my mother's face on that walkway. There's a particular kind of anger that doesn't make you loud. It makes you quiet. It made me very, very quiet. Let me back up. My name doesn't matter as much as theirs does, but you can call me Dana. I'm 37. For 3 years I saved every dollar I could scrape together, and I didn't tell almost anyone what it was for. Not my coworkers at the logistics firm where I pulled overtime most weekends. Not my friends who kept asking why I never wanted to split a beach rental anymore. I had an account on my phone, and I'd renamed it. It just said home for mom and dad. Every time a paycheck cleared, I moved something into it. $40, $200. Once, after a brutal stretch of double shifts, almost 1,000. I watched that number climb the way other people watch a sunrise. You have to understand what my parents gave up. My father, Earl, drove a delivery route for 29 years. Same truck company, same pre-dawn alarm, same ache in his lower back that he never once complained about within earshot. My mother, Ruth, raised my brother and me in a rented duplex 25 minutes inland from the water, and for 6 of those years she also took care of her own mother, who'd lost most of her memory by the end. 3 generations under one leaking roof. Ruth stretched every grocery run like it was an athletic event. She patched the same winter coat for me 4 years running. And not once, not a single time in 50 years of marriage, did either of them buy themselves anything that could be called extravagant. When I was little, my father used to drive us to Folly Beach in the summer. We couldn't afford the lots near the sand, so he'd park us almost a mile back and we'd walk the rest, towels over our shoulders, just to sit in the salt air for one afternoon before driving home. 1 afternoon a year. That was the luxury. That memory is the whole reason this story exists. So 8 months ago, when a listing popped up on my phone, a 4-bedroom house with a wraparound porch, 200 feet from the shoreline, I didn't hesitate the way a sensible person should have. The price made my stomach drop. I drained the account. I borrowed against my retirement. I called my brother Marcus, who lives 3 states away, and the 2 of us coordinated everything in whispers over late-night phone calls for weeks. He couldn't contribute much, but he became my second set of hands from a distance. I closed on that house and told no one outside of Marcus. The plan was simple. Their 50th anniversary landed on a Saturday in early autumn. I'd tell my parents I needed their opinion on a property a friend of mine was thinking of buying. I'd drive them out to the coast, walk them up to the porch, and hand my mother a key with both our parents' names already on the deed. I hired a small catering crew. I strung warm lights across the porch myself. I spent a full week assembling a photo collage, 50 years of them, their wedding, my brother as a baby, my grandmother on the duplex steps. And here's the part I'd give anything to take back. My husband's parents, Glenda and Roy Vance, offered to help with setup. Offered isn't even strong enough, Glenda practically insisted. She said she'd handle the decorating and the arrangement of the rooms so I could focus on picking up my parents from the airport hotel where they were staying the night before. At the time, I thought it was generous. I thought, maybe, after 6 years, she was finally softening toward me. That eagerness should have told me everything. I have to be honest about something before I go further. My mother-in-law and I have never been easy with each other. Glenda is the kind of woman who can hand you a compliment that leaves a bruise. Over the years, she'd made remarks about how my husband, Cole, had married a woman who was always working and never building a proper home. About how my career kept me from being the wife she'd pictured for him. And once, at a holiday dinner, she said my parents didn't exactly come from anything, and smiled at me while she said it, daring me to react. I never did react. I told myself Cole would handle it. I told myself it didn't touch me. I was wrong on both counts. If you've ever swallowed an insult to keep the peace at a family table, if you've ever told yourself that staying quiet is the same as being strong, then you already know the slow poison I'm describing. It doesn't go away, it just waits. I picked my parents up that Saturday afternoon, my mother in the lavender dress, My father in the gray suit he'd last worn to Marcus's wedding more than a decade earlier, the cuffs a little loose on him now. They climbed into my car believing they were tagging along to look at someone else's investment. The drive out to the coast takes about 40 minutes. And the whole way, my mother held my hand across the back seat and asked me questions about the neighborhood. Was it safe? Was it quiet? Did I think my friend would be happy there? She had no idea she was describing her own front yard. I want to pause here for a second, because I've replayed that car ride more than any other part of this. My mother's hand was warm, and a little arthritic in mine. She kept squeezing it when she got excited about something, and I sat there holding the biggest secret of my life, thinking, in 20 minutes you're gonna cry, Mom, and it's gonna be the good kind. I was so sure of that. I had no idea what was waiting at the end of that driveway. I have to be honest with you. I don't know how I would have held it together if I'd known. We turned onto the road that runs along the water, and I felt my chest lift the way it always did when the trees opened up and the sky went wide. Then we pulled into the driveway, and everything was wrong. The lights I'd hung 2 days earlier were gone. The porch, which should have had a welcome banner and my photo collage propped on an easel, was bare except for a folding table covered in serving dishes I'd never ordered. And standing in the open doorway, one hand gripping the frame like she'd built the place with her own 2 hands, was Glenda. My stomach dropped. My mother got out first, still smiling, still trapped in the lovely fiction I'd built for her. She made it maybe 3 steps up the walkway, and then Glenda came down off the porch fast, raised her arm, pointed her finger out toward the road, and shouted loud enough that I saw a neighbor 2 lots over turn their head. This is private property. You need to leave. My mother stopped like she'd hit a wall of glass. I watched it happen in slow motion. My father, who I have never once in my entire life heard raise his voice, started to shake. Not a dramatic shake, a small, terrible tremor in his hands as he reached for my mother's shoulder, trying to shield her from something neither of them understood. And my mother's eyes filled instantly, because in her mind she had just been screamed off a stranger's porch, in front of her own daughter, for no reason she could name. Behind Glenda, I caught movement inside the house. Furniture that wasn't mine. Cardboard boxes stacked in the front room that I had never packed. A life being unloaded into a house that belonged to exactly 2 people, and neither of them was named Vance. I still hadn't said a word. Let me stop the story here for a moment, because I think this is the part that matters most, and I don't want to rush past it. There is a specific horror in watching someone you love get humiliated when they've done nothing wrong. It's worse than being humiliated yourself. When it happens to you, you can at least fight back. When it happens to your aging mother, who only wanted to see a pretty house on a Saturday, something inside you goes cold and clear and very dangerous. That's what happened to me. I went cold. If you have ever stood frozen while someone you love was made small in front of a crowd, you know that the loudest thing in that moment is your own heartbeat. I could hear mine. I closed the car door very gently. I don't know why gently. Maybe because some part of me understood that if I slammed it, I wouldn't stop slamming things. I walked up the driveway, and the strangest thing happened. The shouting stopped. Glenda turned at the sound of my footsteps, and for half a second, before she rearranged her face, I saw it. It wasn't surprise. It was the expression of someone caught in the middle of a sentence, not the middle of a discovery. She'd known I was coming. She just hadn't planned on me arriving this soon. Dana, she said, smoothing the front of her blouse like she was about to greet guests at a party she was hosting. This isn't what it looks like. I kept my voice flat. Then explain to me what it looks like. Because from where I'm standing, you just screamed at my mother on the porch of a house she has never set foot in before today. That was when Roy appeared in the doorway behind her. In 6 years, I had never seen my father-in-law look like that. He had his hands jammed into his pockets, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere over my left shoulder, and the posture of a man praying for the ground to swallow him whole. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. His silence was its own confession. Glenda recovered fast. She always did. Roy and I discussed this house weeks ago, she said, waving a hand toward the inside as if that explained a single thing. Given the location, given everything Cole has said about wanting a place near the water someday, we naturally assumed this was meant to be an investment for the whole family. We were simply getting things ready. I let that sit in the air. I wanted everyone to hear it. I especially wanted my parents to hear it. You assumed, I said slowly, that a house I bought with my own money, a house I never once mentioned to you, was somehow yours to fill with your furniture. She opened her mouth. We were only trying to help, came a voice from behind me. But it wasn't her. I turned and there was Cole, walking up the driveway from the second car, the one loaded with the last of the catering supplies. He'd parked behind us and missed the start of it. His face was already pale. His eyes traveled from his mother, to the strange boxes stacked inside the door, to my mother, who was still standing frozen on the walkway with tears running down her face and my father's arm now wrapped fully around her shoulders. I watched my husband's face change. "Cole, sweetheart, we were just trying to get it ready for the family," Glenda started, and her voice had that bright, smoothing over quality I'd heard 100 times. He held up one hand, and then something shifted in him that I had been waiting 6 years to see. "Mom," he said, very quietly, "whose name is on the deed to this house?" She didn't answer. "Whose name, Mom?" A long pause. Then, barely above a whisper, "Dana's." "Then it's not a family investment," he said. "It's my wife's gift to her parents. And you had no right to touch a single box in this house. You sure as hell had no right to scream at her mother on the front steps." I felt my throat tighten. I'd spent 6 years hoping he would choose me in a moment like this. And he just did, without me asking. He turned to his father. "Dad, did you know about this?" Roy nodded, slowly, ashamed. And that single nod told me everything I needed to know. This had not been a spur-of-the-moment misunderstanding. This had been discussed, quietly, over weeks. The assumption underneath it was simple and ugly. Because Cole and I were married, anything I built, anything I earned, anything I bought, would eventually flow into the Vance family ledger. It was never about the house. I want to be fair to Glenda here, as hard as that is, because I've thought about her motivation a lot, and I don't think she woke up that morning intending to be cruel. In her mind, she was protecting her son's future. She came from a generation and a family where money was pooled, where the matriarch managed the assets, where a smart woman secured property for the next generation, before anyone else could. She genuinely believed she was being prudent. She wasn't lying when she said she wanted something solid for the family. The problem is that her version of family had a fence around it, and my parents were always going to be standing on the wrong side of that fence. That's what made it unforgivable. Not the greed, the fence. If you have ever been treated like an outsider by people who were supposed to call you family, you understand that the wound isn't the insult itself. It's the casual certainty behind it, the way they don't even think they're doing anything wrong. I walked past Glenda, into the house, and I started carrying the unfamiliar boxes back out onto the porch. One at a time. I didn't say anything. Nobody stopped me. Then Cole was beside me, lifting a lamp that wasn't ours. A stack of dishes that weren't ours. 2 folding chairs that had replaced my catering setup. And then Roy, silent, his face tight with what looked, for the first time, like genuine shame, helping us load it all into their car. Glenda stood on the porch and watched her own son carry her belongings out of a house she'd tried to claim as hers. When she finally spoke, all the confidence had drained out of her voice. "I only wanted to make sure this family had something solid for the future." I stopped, a box in my arms, and I looked at her. "This was never your future to plan," I said. And then, more gently than I expected, because the anger had burned down into something steadier, "This is a gift. From a daughter to her parents. For 50 years of marriage that none of us, not you, not me, are entitled to take credit for." They left about 20 minutes later. The silence after they pulled out was nothing like the silence when I'd first walked up that driveway. That earlier silence had teeth. This one was clean. My mother was still trembling, but my father had stopped. And as the sound of their car faded down the road, I watched the tension finally drain out of his shoulders. We spent the rest of that evening doing what I'd planned all along. I rehung the lights myself. Cole reset the photo collage that had gotten knocked sideways in the chaos. My mother, once she understood, once it finally landed that this house was hers, sat down in a porch chair and cried again. But this time it was the other kind of crying. The kind that comes from relief instead of fear. My father walked to the porch railing and stood there a long time, just looking at the water, the way he's always handled the things too big for words. I came and stood next to him. He didn't look at me. He just said, very quietly, "We used to park a mile back." And I said, "I know, Dad." And that was all either of us needed to say. This whole experience taught me something I keep coming back to. The mistake most people make is believing that staying silent in the face of small disrespect is the same as keeping the peace. It isn't. It just teaches the other person that the disrespect is allowed. What Cole finally understood in that driveway, what nobody else standing there had let themselves admit, was that loyalty isn't a feeling. It's a choice you make out loud. In the exact moment, it costs you something. If there's one thing you take from this story, let it be this. If you've been meaning to do something for the people who raised you, don't wait for the perfect milestone. Call them this week, not for an anniversary. Just because the people who sacrificed for you quietly are the ones least likely to ever ask you for anything. And here's the question I want you to sit with. Is there someone in your life whose small, repeated disrespect you've been excusing because it's easier than the confrontation? What is that silence actually costing you? I'd really like to know where you land on all of this. So before you go, tell me in the comments. If you think Cole did the right thing standing up to his own mother, comment the number 1. If you think Dana should have warned her parents about the kind of woman Glenda was long before that day, comment the number 2. And if you think the whole family was set up to fail from the start, comment the number 3. I read these. I really do. And tell me where you're watching from, and what time it is there right now, because it amazes me to think about all the different places these stories travel to. And if you've ever lived through something like this, a family member trying to take what wasn't theirs, I'd genuinely love to hear your story, because I promise you, you are not the only one. If this story moved you even a little, do me a favor and subscribe, because this channel is built on exactly this: ordinary people finding the strength to stand up for the ones who raised them, and I'd love for you to be here for the next one. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Charleston to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental.